Shabbat Shalom, which
Shalom.
is peace on Yahweh's holy Sabbath day. We are, of course, gathered to keep our new moon, which is a new month. Yahweh has given us a way for us to keep time regardless of man's trinkets that we have and that we severely trust in. Of course, we know the time and the date by our phones now. We don't look at anything else. We don't even remember anybody's number anymore because the phone does everything for us. As a matter of fact, even in keeping the stages of the moon and looking at those things, we have an app for that. So the phone does everything. But of course, it's going to come a time that we're not going to have those things, and it's going to be here sooner than we think. That we are not, we won't have these things to depend on. But Yahweh has given us these signs that are in the sky, and they are constant. Even those signs, when it comes down to the righteous judgment that is set to happen here upon the earth, we're going to then see a distortion of those very things that he put in the heavens, the moon and the sun. All of those things are then going to go and be perplexed. This will definitely let us know that that time is upon us. So he has put those things there, and our forefathers understood these things because they had less distractions than we do. And we have to make ourselves go through these things. So we're going to go through, especially since we have new people. I try to go through this every few new moons so that they're that we all grow in understanding about what that new moon is. Brother, read Isaiah 66 in verse 23.
And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Shabbat to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, says Yahweh.
Now, this is a future kingdom. This is the things that are prophesied to come upon the children of Israel. And remember, it was the children of Israel who were given this holy law, which is why most of the punishments fall on us. And a lot of times we look and we think it's unfair that we're getting punished more than everybody else. But it's just, that's the way it is when it comes to the point where if you got 4 or 5 children in the house and the house is tore up, the first one, the one who's going to get dealt with harshly is the oldest, because that's the one who all the responsibility falls upon. That's the one who's going to get the most out of everything that is brought into the house by the parents. So when it comes down to punishment, they're also going to get the most. Well, that's where we sit in the scenario of the nations, not in the fact that we are the oldest, in the fact that we were the ones that the holy and righteous law was given to. It wasn't given to the other nations. So when it comes down to it, we're going to face that punishment more than anybody else. And it says when you deal with this from one new moon to another, and from one Shabbat to another. So then you have the new moon even being mentioned before the Shabbat. And we know the Shabbat is his perpetual covenant. And it says, shall all flesh come to worship before me. We even have Hebrews that are not dealing with the new moon. So we know that we have most of Christendom and people like that, even Jewish people, they a lot of them don't keep or even know what the new moon is. Of course, the leaders know because it's what they use to come up with the calendar. So in understanding how to do that, we're going to go through that again. Now, when you look at the graphic where it says the new moon that's up, you see the sun, and then you see a white part of the moon, which is illustrating the lit part of the moon. One part of the moon is always lit at any given time. You're just not able to see the lit part of the moon. All right. Then right after that, you see the dark part in this graphic. That represents the part of the moon that is not lit. That is completely dark. And when you get to this line and then it goes to the blue shaded part of the earth, that is the part of the earth that represents where we are. So from where we are on the earth, we then look and see the dark moon. That then is what a new moon is. That means that the sun, the moon, and the earth are in complete alignment. That is why the moon is dark, because it is in complete alignment. Brother, read Colossians chapter 2 and verse 16 for me.
Let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of an holy day or of the new moon or of the Shabbat days.
Right. And read the next part.
Which are a shadow of things to come.
Right. And we know that we've heard televangelists read these things, and then they keep that last part off, which is a shadow of things to come. So you have a lot of people in Christendom believing that they don't have to do any of these things. So it mentions the new moon, it mentions the Sabbath, it mentions the holy days. But if you can stop that at one place and not read the rest of it, then it gives people the belief that they don't have to do that. So it is amazing. I watched this being read, and I watched how the person dealt with it. And we're talking about a televangelist that has, thousands of members, and all of those members walked away believing that they don't have to deal with any of these things because of how that was read. Now, that's, of course, was a Christian congregation, but do understand that we have Hebrews that are doing the same thing. The very same scriptures that talk about new moon and baptism, I've heard Hebrew Israelites read those very same things, but tell you that they mean something else. So let's go to Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1, and we're going to read verses 1 through 10.
In the beginning, Elohim created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of Elohim moved upon the face of the waters. And Elohim said, Let there be light, and there was light.
So in verse 3, Elohim said, Let there be light, and there was light. Do understand, there was not a sun or a moon at this point in creation. When he says, let there be light, it is his light. When we get into Revelation, in the completion of things, we're talking about the end of Revelation. It says that there shall be no sun there. There shall be no moon there, because he is the light of it. So the ending is just like the beginning. He didn't need the sun. The sun, from our understanding and from our point of view, it is a natural thing. It is a natural light because it is something that is from within the atmosphere. But in the whole part of spirituality and understanding Yahweh, it is an artificial light because he is the real authentic light. So this is the artificial light that was given to us, the sun. The real light is him. It has always been him. And in the end, we're going to be back to the real organic light. Go ahead.
Verse 4. And Elohim saw the light, that it was good. And Elohim divided the light from the darkness.
So when he divides the light from the darkness and is his light, he can get his light away from being able to shine on the earth. Go ahead.
And Elohim called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. And Elohim said, Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters.
Now, do understand as we're talking about a day and a night, and we're talking about the creation of earth within this time span. Do understand that we're dealing with, at this point, Yahweh's days, that there is no reference for man because man is not present on the earth. So, you have a lot of people that don't understand this, so they'll come and say that the earth is, 6,000 years old, which is not possible. There's millions of our years in between day 1 and day 2. We're dealing with Yahweh's time, not ours. Go ahead.
And Elohim made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And Elohim called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. And Elohim said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together onto one place, and let the dry land appear.
And let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. When you look at the picture of the Pangea, which is basically all of the land, if you push it all together, it fits together like a puzzle. Go ahead.
And Elohim called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And Elohim saw that it was good.
And Elohim saw that it was good. Keep going. Let's go to verse 14.
And Elohim said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And Elohim made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And Elohim set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And Elohim saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the 4th day. And Elohim said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that has life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of the heaven. And Elohim created great whales and every living creature that moves, which the waters brought forth abundantly.
Okay, where you at?
At the end of verse 21.
Okay. Where did you start from?
You said 14.
Start from 11.
Okay. And Elohim said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed was in itself upon the earth, and it was so. And the earth brought forth grass and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And Elohim saw that it was good.
All right. So this is then the beginning, and at the beginning we then see that the earth is bringing forth grass. So we know that anytime we're talking about the beginning of our year, it should be at a point that there is growth going on. We know that the growth that they have for us, that they keep to worship the pagan god Janus, we know that nothing is growing in January. So we know that there's something seriously wrong with their new year. Go ahead.
And the evening and the morning were the 3rd day. And Elohim said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. Right.
So when people tell you that we have a lunar calendar, there's something seriously wrong with that, because right here he says, Elohim said, let there be lights in the firmament of heaven, lights, plural, of the heaven to divide the day from the night. Now, this is dividing the day from the night. He was already dividing the day from the night himself. But that was the organic light that man wasn't going to be able to possess his light in continuance. Okay? So now there has to be something else that's going to divide the day from the night, the light from the dark. Then it says, let them be for signs, for seasons, for days, and for years. So when people say that we have a solar calendar, there's something wrong with that. When somebody says we have a lunar calendar, there's something wrong with that. All of those things were used to make our calendar. And that is where we get the biggest problem, that people are trying to make the calendar fit the things that they deal with. Brother, read that we have that comes right up under that.
The moon has a nearly circular orbit. It takes the moon 27.322 days to go around the earth once. Because of this motion, the moon appears to move about 13 degrees against the stars each day, or about 1/2 degree per hour. If you watch the moon over the course of several hours one night, you will notice that its position among the stars will change by a few degrees. The changing position of the moon with respect to the sun leads to lunar phases.
All right. So when you look at this, this is basically a little bit more in detail of the other graphic. You have the sunlight coming from the right part, and of course you have that one part of the moon that's lit, but you're on the earth looking at the dark part. As that orbit, when we talk about days, months, years, all you're dealing with are orbits. You have the earth that turns in itself either toward or away from the sun. In that 24-hour span, we got a day. It goes from day to night, back to day. Then you have the moon that is orbiting around the earth. That gives us our month. So this is why the phases are changing, because of where the sun is based on this orbit going around. Each as that moon orbits the earth, those phases change, and then when they get right back to that same point, then it gets back dark, which is a new moon, and it starts the entire process all over again. So remember, in Genesis it says for days, months, our seasons, and our years. So you have your day with the rotation of the earth. You have your month with the orbit of the moon around the earth. Then you have the moon and the earth orbiting around the sun, which takes a year. So the entire process of what Yahweh has is explained in Genesis 1 and verse 14. But because man wants to do something else, man has then come with this Enoch calendar and tried to do some other things. Go ahead, brother.
Measuring the motion of the moon around the earth relative to the distant stars lead us to what is called the sidereal period. The sidereal period is the time required for a celestial body within our solar system to complete one revolution with respect to the fixed stars, i.e., as absorbed from some fixed point outside the system. The sidereal period of the moon is the time needed for it to return to the same position against the background of stars.
Now, why that there's a different period, do understand that everything is still moving as all of these things are happening. The earth is moving as well. So you have the moon making its orbit, and it's getting back to the same point, but then the other things are moving as well. Go ahead.
The moon appears to move completely around the celestial sphere once in about 27.3 days as observed from the earth. This is called a sidereal month. It represents the orbital period of the moon around the earth.
Keep going.
Measuring the motion of the moon around the earth relative to the sun leads us to what is called the synodic, pronounced synodic period. The synodic period is the time required for a body within the solar system, such as a planet, the moon, or an artificial Earth satellite, to return to the same or approximately the same position relative to the sun as seen by an observer on the earth. The moon's synodic period is the time between successive recurrences of the same phase, between full moon and full moon.
So this gives us our real time based on the rest of the things moving. So it's like if I stand at row, the first row in here, and you know, in the time that it take Kish to walk to the dining hall and back, then he said, okay, this is, you know, the period for the time that it takes for me to go back there and come back to this first row. But in the time that it took him, I was moving also. So now I'm at the third row. So the one point is him getting back to the first row, which is where we both started, but I was moving too. So now he's got to catch back up with me. That's our real month. Go ahead.
The moon takes 29.5 days to return to the same point on the celestial sphere as reference to the sun because of the motion of the earth around the sun. This is called a synodic month. Lunar phases as observed from the earth are correlated with the synodic month.
Now, when you even look at and examine those phases, you'll find that the new moon is the complete opposite of the full moon. New moon is completely dark, and then the full moon is going to be completely lit. Of course, we have now people teaching that the full moon is the new moon. Brother, read that definition there.
Yaryak, from the same as H3391, the moon.
So when we find things written in here, and in Strong's, that H3394, Yaryak is the word for moon, because you have people that believe that they try to teach against the new moon because they say that they can't find certain words in the Hebrew that leads to it. And then, of course, read the next one.
Kodesh, from H2318, the new moon, by implication a month.
Right. So a new moon, this whole cycle, this orbit of the moon around the earth gives us our month. What man has is, of course, he has set up an artificial time. But even when you get to how the people keep Easter, and people never told us how they kept Easter. Most people who have kept Easter for all their lives, they have no idea how the day is calculated. AJ, we wake that brother up right there. When you get to how those things are added up, then they take, of course, the first new moon after the vernal equinox. This is why a lot of people just wait for them to put it on the calendar. And then they say, okay, well, that's when Easter is going to be. But they're going by a system here. They're just not telling people what the system is. Go ahead.
Years. If a year were always considered to be 365 days, the calendar would effectively slip one day forward every 4 years. After 360 years of that same system, the calendar would be 90 days off from the true seasons.
Now remember, when Yahweh gave us all of these things, our holy days, they must be kept in their correct seasons. See, we can't do the things like they have Ramadan. Ramadan moves through every season of the year because it's completely lunar. So you can't, this is why I said Genesis 1 and verse 14 says both, all of the things in the heaven. You can't just use the moon. If you use the moon, it's going to keep moving. And those little bitty days might not mean nothing to you right away, or it might seem little. But those little bitty days going to keep adding up. And before you know it, you're going to be way off. And how I like to explain it to people, when people say, you know, that's a little bit, it don't really make that much a difference. All right, let's take $25 off your check this week. Okay, let's take another $25 off your check next week, including the other 25 that I took then. We just adding. Okay, now let's take another $25. Oh yeah, now you fighting in the break room. Well, Yahweh feel the same way. He has given us a system, and each way this thing keeps sliding back because of how it's being dealt with. So there's a real problem with just using the lunar part of it. You're just using the moon. That's not what he gave you. Genesis 1 and verse 14 is clear. Go ahead.
Winter would end in June rather than in March if a calendar assumed a moon cycle to be 29 or 30 days rather than 29 and a half. It would become 6 days off in 1 year, completely useless.
But because we want to make everything fit into our timetable, we want to put everything in these nicely crafted little squares that we create in our own mind, We want to make it do something that's easy for us, and Yahweh already gave us something that's easy for us. Look up. How difficult is that? Look up. You have these people who fight against this calendar. They said, what if it's cloudy, brother? You won't be able to see the moon. I said, let me tell you something, brother. If it's cloudy for a whole month, you need to get the hell out of wherever that is. That's small, brother. Them ain't clouds. I ain't never seen a cloud hang around for a month. Clouds move, man. When we was little, we used to lay back on the car and watch the clouds, man. Watch the stars. Cloud don't sit there. If you got a cloud that is sitting in one place, you might be about to die. There's something seriously wrong with that place. Because it's wind, man. That stuff is moving. That means you would have to have a constant cloud. That means the cloud moving and another cloud coming behind it constantly. Man, if you ever see that, you need to be worried. Because that's not natural. There's something seriously wrong if that happens. That's what ash clouds and things like that's why they cause so much problems, because they will completely block the sun. Clouds don't do that. So the brothers who are even making that claim, it is the dumbest claim ever. We can sit here and watch clouds move. They ain't gonna stay there for a month. Go ahead, bro.
We're all fairly familiar with how the Roman calendar solves the problem of the extra quarter day in the year. Every 4 years, we have a leap year.
Right, and I always used to wonder about that. When we were little, we always heard these things about the leap year, but you know what we did? We asked our parents, they either didn't know or didn't care and told us to go shut up and sit down somewhere, and we left it alone. But it was always a question, honestly. Like, how do you know when to make a leap year? What do you, and what people did, what grown-ups did, they just accepted it. So as a kid, you learn to just accept it because your parents just accepted it. Go ahead.
Pope Gregory fixed the Julian calendar, implemented by Julius Caesar in 1582. He took 10 days out of the calendar that year. October the 4th was followed by October 15th that year. Removing these days compensated for all of the unnecessary leap years from the Council of Nicaea till that time.
Now, if you look at this calendar, you'll see that it went from Thursday the 4th to Friday the 15th. Didn't change any other days of the week, any of those things. All of those things have still remained constant. We still have those same things, but this is why you have either the Julian calendar or the Gregorian calendar. This came from Euro-Gentiles and the things that they set up. But Yahweh had already set up his in Genesis 1 verse 14. So anybody who says, you know, they have an Enoch calendar, I always ask the question, where is Enoch in Genesis 1 and verse 14? He does not exist. So he can't possibly have a calendar because he's not here. So there's something seriously wrong with that. Let's go to Exodus chapter 12. Exodus chapter 12. And let's read verses 1 through 3.
Verse 1. And Yahweh spake unto Moshe and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you.
So, Yahweh has already said what the first month of the year is supposed to be. Now, we already read in the beginning that there was this growth that was happening. We know that nothing is growing in January, so it's something wrong with the beginning of their year versus what is written in this book. Go ahead.
Speak you unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for an house.
So now we know the month that they're talking about. We're talking about the month in which Passover is in. This is the beginning of the year. So we know that that is happening at either the end of March or in between March and April. Hence the whole term of us being called April Fools, because here it is, the April Fools, as they call it, are the people who keep in the new year in April. Imagine, and you see how we get pushed into keeping other people's culture. Here it is, they set up this twisted new year where everything is cold, dead, nothing is growing, and they're worshiping their pagan god, but they call you a fool because you're keeping the one that's written in the book. Now, if you have some low self-esteem issues, they're going to win, because they're going to call you a fool, and to fit in, you're going to be out worshiping the pagan gods just like the rest of the people. And do understand that the folks at the church are worshiping the same pagan god as the folks at the club. The same rituals that the people were doing at the club is the same rituals that they did in church. So don't think just because you went to church on December 31st that you wasn't worshiping a pagan god. You were worshiping the same one. Let's go to Exodus chapter 13 and start that at verse 1.
And Yahweh spake unto Moshe, saying, Sanctify unto me all the firstborn whatsoever opens the womb among the children of Israel, both of man and of beast, it is mine. And Moshe said unto the people, Remember this day in which you came out from Egypt, out of the house of bondage. For by strength of hand Yahweh brought you out from this place. There shall no leavened bread be eaten. This day came you out in the month Abib.
So now, we now have a name, Abib, listed for this month. Go ahead.
And it shall be when Yahweh shall bring you into the land of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, which he sware unto your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, that you shall keep the service in this month. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and in the 7th day shall be a feast to Yahweh.
All right, jump to verse 10.
You shall therefore keep this ordinance in his season from year to year.
In his season from year to year. So you cannot completely just use the moon, because we know how the moon is set up. It's going to keep moving, days off, which are going to add up, and it's going to be that your Passover will not be in the correct season. Read the definition there for Abib.
From an unused root, meaning to be tender, green, that is a young ear of grain. Hence the name of the month Abib or Nisan.
Now Nisan is a pagan name. All right. You're going to find all kind of, when you start reading through this book, you're going to start finding certain names of months. Yahweh is impeccable in his order. When it comes down to days, the only day that had a name was the Sabbath. The others was first day, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, sixth day, Sabbath day. It's automatically sanctified and set apart because it's the only day that has a name. Then you have the months. The one that he's naming is Abib. Now, you'll find a whole lot of other names, but you're also going to find that the majority of the time we were also in captivity when these names of months sprang up, and then our people just got accustomed to doing that, so we kept doing it. Go ahead.
As the earth revolves around the sun, there are 2 moments each year when the sun is exactly above the equator. These moments are called equinoxes, occur around March 20th or the 21st, and September the 22nd or the 23rd. Equinox literally means equal night, since the length of day and night is nearly equal in all parts of the world during the equinoxes.
Right. And when you start examining these things and start looking at the pagan holidays, you'll find that they're all sun symbols that they're worshiping. You'll find that when you start dealing with the winter solstice and December 22nd, you'll find that Christmas was right there directly on that winter solstice, they're worshiping the sun, S-U-N. We worship the sun, S-O-N. Lucifer is impeccable with his tricks. Go ahead.
The March equinox marks when the northern hemisphere starts to tilt toward the sun, which means longer, sunnier days.
Now remember, Genesis 1 and verse 14. They're for signs, seasons, and your years. So as this earth and its orbiting moon is making its orbit around the sun, it then tilts. The little points in the graphic basically is just showing you the poles, the top and the bottom, of course, are imaginary lines. They're just showing you what's happening to the earth as it starts to tilt. As it starts to tilt toward the sun, you notice this is, it says right here, June. So you know it's automatically hotter then because the earth is tilting toward the sun. And also this orbit is not a complete circle. It's this oblong shape thing. So where these Enoch calendar people, they want to divide it into this perfect circle. That's not what it is. Go ahead.
In the northern hemisphere, the March equinox is called the vernal equinox because it signals the beginning of spring. Vernal means fresh or new, like the spring. The September equinox is called the autumnal equinox because it marks the first day of fall, autumn. When the northern hemisphere starts to tilt toward the sun in spring, the southern hemisphere starts to tilt away from the sun, signaling the start of fall. Thus, in the southern hemisphere, the March equinox is called the autumnal equinox, and the September equinox is called the vernal equinox.
So in other words, it's opposite depending on where you are on the earth. Go ahead.
The March equinox signals the beginning of spring in the northern hemisphere and autumn in the southern hemisphere. It marks that special moment when the sun crosses the celestial equator, going from south to north.
Now, of course, when we deal with this, we're dealing with from man's perspective on earth. These, of course, are these imaginary lines. As our fathers, you know, they didn't have Disney Channel and, you know, Spike TV to watch UFC fighting all night. So they actually paid attention to the stars and stuff like that. So it was clear to notice that this thing is not in the same position. So in looking at you know, this movement, they're able to see that, hey, certain things happen in order and they happen constantly, and they were able to pay attention and you know, track these things and notice that it goes exactly as Yahweh had written down, that you start having the same changes once you start seeing these same occurrences. Go ahead.
Our sun rises earlier now and nightfall comes later. Plants are sprouting, winds are softening. For us in the northern hemisphere, people are enjoying the warmer days of spring. Meanwhile, south of the equator, autumn begins.
All right, and when we deal with this March equinox, this is the point that we use this point of between March 20th and March 21st. We then look for our next new moon after that vernal equinox. That is when our new month or our new year begins. The same way that they pick Easter. They just didn't tell us that. Go ahead.
Seasons, which is H4150, Mo'adah, from H3259, properly an appointment, that is, a fixed time or season, specifically a festival, conventionally a year, by implication an assembly, as convened from a definite purpose, technically the congregation, by extension, the place of meeting.
So these are all ways in which this word can be used. Whenever you're reading a definition, a lot of times people think it means all of these things at the same time. It depends on in which particular way that is written. But when we talk about this moed, we're then talking about this fixed time or seasons and, assembling. Go to years.
Shana, the first form being in plural only, the second form being feminine. Shanae or Shana, from H8138, a year as a revolution of time.
As a revolution of time. So when we deal with what Yahweh has given us, we're basically dealing with these orbits. The rotation and the orbits give us all of the things for our days, months, and years. So when Yahweh has these things and he says, from one new moon to another shall all flesh come to worship before me. This is the day that he was speaking of. This is also going to be, of course, how we count all of our holy days. And that's all that we're going to do for tonight. Enjoy your new moon and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.